What's going on, guys? It's Jackson Lore. Welcome back to the Fitness for Life podcast. Today, I am going to be covering the topic of rest. And this is something that many people misunderstand. A lot of people don't fully understand. And so I want to cover this topic so that you guys have a little bit more clarity on rest in the workout. So resting in between sets, what that looks like, resting in between workout days, and then resting in between big chunks of training. So say if you are really training hard for something, or you've been training and also like trying to cut weight for something, or just training leading up to training for a long period of time during a stressful period, rest after something like that. And also rest on vacation and what that looks like with your fitness. And so that is what I'm going to be covering today. So let's start with just rest in a workout session. So during a workout session, a lot of times, you're going to need to rest in between sets. It's not a lot of times. Every time you're in a workout session, you're going to need to rest in between sets. This can look like a lot of different things. And so what I always recommend, in a perfect world, you have as much equipment available to you and as much space available to you as possible. So that's, if you have your own home gym, or if you go to a small private gym where there's not too many members, you can go at a time where it's not as full. Okay, now I might be able to rotate between stations so that I'm not fatiguing my muscles as much. And just that act of rotating to the next station. So say I'm doing a bench press and a split squat and maybe a core exercise or a carry. If I have those kind of set out for myself, again, this is in a perfect world, and I can rotate between them each and kind of do it like in rounds, as you might in like a CrossFit gym or a group exercise class or something like that. That is going to be ideal, because what you're doing is you're minimizing the fatigue to your muscles in between each. So typically I'm going to want to do an arms exercise and then move to a legs exercise and then maybe move to a core exercise. And so that is going to help minimize the fatigue, help you get the most out of your exercise. So for most people, that's not going to be the case. For most people, you're going to have to compete with people for space, for equipment. There's the age-old adage that, somebody's doing biceps curls in the squat rack and you can't get access to what you need, that sort of thing. And so what I recommend in this case is, okay, minimum, what we know is for strength and for full recovery, minimum 2 minutes between your sets is what you need to get complete recovery before you go back to the next set. If you are somebody who has hit a plateau and is not waiting this amount of time in between sets, then that is something you absolutely need to do, is you need to start spreading out how long you're waiting between your exercise sets. Because what's probably happening is, instead of you being able to be fresh for each set, you are getting more and more fatigued throughout the time, more and more fatigued throughout that exercise, to the point where instead of your last set being your most intense or your heaviest, your last set ends up being your weakest. And that's not necessarily what we want. You want to be fatigued, you want to exert yourself, but you don't want that to happen at a lower force threshold. And so to get the most out of your sessions, that's sort of between 2 and 3 minutes is ideal for resting in between sets. Now, I know that not everybody has the amount of time that you need to rest that long in between sets. So what I would recommend is just find that sweet spot of, okay, how long does it take me to get my exercises done typically? Roughly how long am I resting in between sets now? And then you can even just do the math and figure it out, right? How many sets of an exercise am I doing? How many rest periods am I doing during my exercise sessions? And then, you can see, okay, how much longer do I actually have? Could I actually commit to being in the gym each time I'm there? Do I have the amount of time I need to rest for 2 minutes in between sets? So that is, that's ideal. I talk with my athletes, especially all the time, is like, hey, you do not want to. We're not going to use the weight room as a time to condition you when we're working on strength. When we're working on strength, when we're working on speed, both ends of the spectrum, we're not really trying to work on conditioning. What we are going to be working on is implementing, getting the most out of our strength and speed work, which requires us to be fully rested and recovered before we start the next rep. So that is the general approach I would take to resting in between sets. Is, like I said, if you don't have as much time as you need to give it the full 2 to 3 minutes, that's fine. Figure out how much time you can give. You can do the math on this, and then go from there, right? The next thing I want to talk about is rest days in between sessions. Okay, so in between training days, there's a couple ways to approach this, and really one of the things that I recommend, and I've recommended it on this podcast before, is that most people do not need to be training 5-6 days a week, seven. I never have anyone train 7 days a week, and maybe I'll get some flack for that, but in general, that's one of the things. Like, I have to build in a rest day in my training week, no matter who I'm working with, because if I'm not building in enough time for rest and for recovery, then there's the changes and the adaptations that take place while we're resting are not going to be able to take place, or they're not going to be able to take place to the fullest that they need to in order for the best adaptations to occur. Now, a rest day for someone who's new to the gym might look like a complete rest day, where maybe you're getting up and you're doing some walking. I've talked before about not having any zero movement days. You don't want days where you sit on the couch all day, or you sit at your desk all day and do nothing else. Whether you're playing with your kids, whether you're going out for a walk, whether you're just doing something where you're moving your body, stretching, whatever it is, on your rest days, that's going to be beneficial to the recovery and the repair process. That's going to help you build muscle. It's going to help you recover well. If you are, so on the flip side, if you're someone who's, say a competitive bodybuilder, competitive strongman, your rest day might look like still having a training session, but having a training session that is much, much lighter, that is really, I talk about with my in-season athletes, priming the body, right? Priming the body for performance. Might feel like an easy day, but it's just enough movement that's going to help you recover and not feel more sore, not pushing yourself so hard that you're doing the damage to your body that we do during a really hard training session. So that's sort of how you want to approach rest days. Most people should have some sort of rest day in between their training sessions. If you go from having training 5 days a week to training 4 days a week, but you're able to train harder those 4 days, much harder than you were to be going all 5 days, and your body's actually recovering more in between, it's likely that you'll notice an increase in the results from your training. Now, this is something that over time you might notice you need to go back up to 5, and you can fluctuate between the two, but that's something that oftentimes can really, just adding one extra rest day every now and then can benefit your body in that way. If you are so then approaching rest from the standpoint of vacationing, right? Or longer periods of rest after heavy periods of training. Now, most elite athletes, most people who are in combat sports, people who are in just elite competition level, they understand that after a really hard training cycle, your body needs time to rest and recover from that. If you continue to train the same way, if you continue to push yourself that way, the likelihood of developing injuries, developing chronic conditions, just developing problems that can persist because your body is is in this really sympathetic nervous your nervous system's in this really sympathetic state where it's on high alert all the time. That is something that can be detrimental to your health. And so that longer periods of rest after hard periods of training and conditioning can be beneficial. What I compare this to, so that's sort of the athlete standpoint, but what I compare this to in the everyday person's life is, say you are a parent of young kids, say you are going through a really stressful either job transition, house transition, some sort of death in the family, anything that's putting a lot of stress and pressure on you mentally can heighten the response our body takes to training in a negative way. And so what I recommend is, if you're somebody who is still committed to training during these really difficult times, one of the things you want to do is, every couple months, you might consider backing off just a little bit, maybe taking a week off of your training just to decompress, let your body heal, let your body recover, get your rest, de-stress a little bit. Again, taking the mindset of having zero movement days, right? Get a walk in, play with your kids, find somebody to go spend some time outside, stretch, that sort of thing, do some mobility work without putting that really heavy external load on your body. Those are things that are going to really benefit you in the long runs. Every now and then, if you have a really high stress job, this can be helpful. It's just taking a little bit of time off, whether it be a few days, a week. I have people, at the highest level, people will go multiple weeks where they won't train at all, and you would be surprised at how well your body can get back into that zone. The one thing that people lose probably the most quickly during a time like this is speed. But even then, a lot of times speed athletes are so overtrained that when they get to the point of being able to dial it back and rest for a while, they will find when they come back, they're actually faster. So when they come off of their rest periods, they're actually faster. And that's something I've seen time and time again. When I was working with, there was an athlete I was working with in my undergrad when I was working as an athletic training student. And the athletic trainer there noticed he had a habit of becoming overtrained as he was approaching his heavy competition days. And so one of the things that they made him do was they put him, so he was having some difficulty with his feet and his ankles. They put him in a walking boot, basically completely immobilized his foot for 2 weeks prior to competition. And he set personal records when he took that boot off, and he had, I think, a day to prepare for prepare for his competition. He set personal records in that competition just because of essentially allowing his body to rest and recover. And so I think that's one of the things we need to understand, is that just because we're resting does not mean our body is not doing the things it needs to do to help us adapt to what we've been doing over the last, whether it's several weeks or several months. Those things can take place longer and beyond when we stop training. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. Thank you for listening. If you're new here, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. I got some good content coming out on a daily basis. So hope to see you guys soon.